Welcome to the Hunter's Advantage podcast, where a group of budget-minded hunters scour the woods for whitetail bucks and whatever other big game is in season. Tune in each week to hear the hilarious public and private land hunting stories and mistake-filled lessons learned. We believe that every hunt brings us closer to God and that we exist to share the good news. And now, your hosts, Christian Babcock and Jake Gaylord.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hunter's Advantage podcast. Today, I think we got a good one for you today. Obviously, hopefully the temperatures around your neck of the woods are kind of cooling down. Maybe you'll get one of those nice, crisp, cool breezes blowing through right before the heat sends you back to reality with the 95, 98 degree weather. But here with Christy Babcock, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing fantastic, Davey Crockett. How are you doing?
Nice you to notice my nice luscious hair I got going on here. I'm balding, so this is a good cover up.
Have you seen those guys that like from the front they're completely bald, but they turn around and they have like one like lock of hair? No, just like one strand that's like bundled up and it's like that long.
It's like a little rat tail. Yeah, no. I think I could do that. Like I think I could really fool people because the sides of my head grows really well and also kind of the back. But dude, I got a nice good ball. I'm 27 years old and I got a pretty good little bald spot on the crown of my head. So it's awesome. It's awesome. But yeah, early season whitetail tactics.
That's the topic today.
I think so. So previously, like obviously here in Oklahoma, it has an October 1st opener. We've had a few experiences in the whitetail woods when it comes to, hunting a little bit before that, specifically Kansas, because that's like, a neighboring state of Oklahoma. And we spent a pretty good, and Nebraska. Yeah. We spent some pretty good time, at least from my perspective, in Kansas, right before trail cameras got abolished for some stupid reason. But whether that be summer scouting and then hunting at early season. And today we're just really going to talk about what we kind of focused on then, because it wasn't for a lack of trying that, I came up empty handed in Kansas and then you killed. So
don't you diminish my kill.
No. I wasn't. What I was going to say is I think I should let you take the lead on like kind of what we were looking for, and let's even go back with scouting wise, like what were we really focusing in on, during early season, whether that be in Kansas or maybe early season October 1st in Oklahoma.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of a Southerner going to the Midwest, because the majority of people that listen to this podcast are coming from the South. If you listen to this from the Midwest, please don't quit listening. But the majority,
my ears, they're bleeding.
Yeah. I mean, they're two very different games, the South and the Midwest. And so I had to, and I think you too, and Carol had to think about deer hunting from a completely different perspective. I don't know if you noticed it, but if you listen to the majority of pretty popular hunting podcasts, they're usually from the perspective of Midwest deer hunting, and people tend to talk in like absolutes, like, what do you mean? Just hunt them on bed to food. First of all, I was like, what does that mean? Does that mean bed to the corn feeder? What does that mean? you like, I didn't really understand any of that. So you kind of have to take a step back. And I don't think the Midwestern game is any easier than anywhere else, but I think it's simpler in a lot of ways. And simpler to understand, hard, maybe just as hard to execute because you're still hunting deer. So from a scouting perspective, from someone going from maybe Texas or Oklahoma or Arkansas, or let's just say somewhere in the South to the Midwest, what you're going to have to quickly get your mind around, from my perspective, is limited cover and a lot of ag. And you might think that's like a really, really good thing. In a lot of instances, it is, right? An abundance of food, a limited amount of cover. You easily think like, well, I'll just hunt them coming out of that cover to come into that big food. So the places that we scouted was mainly looking for that sort of stuff. So isolated bedding next to really good food, which in this type of the year was beans for the most part.
What was the biggest eye opener that you seen hunting, let's say the more mountainous parts of Oklahoma, or even, the northeast corner of Oklahoma where we kind of grew up in hunting, where it's kind of like basically just a diluted version of Kansas, but because in where our neck of the woods, northeast Oklahoma, it's cattle ground, right? And so
Yeah.
you might get those, open fields, but it's not full of ag or anything like that. It's just pasture land. And then you have those little strips of timber, maybe along a creek or something, that should be good, but again, there's cattle on it. So going to Kansas and kind of seeing the similar layout, similar terrain, but instead of cattle pasture, it's, ag. What difference did you see? Because for me, just to give you an example and kind of a little bit of context, what I noticed was the trails that you seen in these little strips of timber, they weren't made by cattle. And so it's just like, oh, what else could make this? Deer, right? And so it seemed like it was a lot easier to pinpoint where the deer were actually moving and stuff. And like to get on that bed to food, it really opened my eyes to like just how they travel, right? So like let's say a piece of public, it had the timber cover, but it didn't really have any food per se, like big ag food, I should say. Not like I'm not talking about oaks or just regular forage. I'm talking about just like crops, right? Those crops could be a property or two over, but then you had to look at it from just a lot bigger scale than I guess you could back home. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Northeast Oklahoma is like if the Ozarks and the Plains had a baby. That's kind of like what it is. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, it's not really big on ag production. So I'd say the thing that stuck out to me was, I don't know if you do this. I do this a lot, where you look at something on the map and you think, man, this has got to be it, right? You talk yourself into it. You look at different pieces of topography and maybe bedding areas, and in the mountains, it's like you find ways to rationalize it in your brain why this would work, and then you walk into that spot and you're like, wrong. No to the next spot.
Mm.
Like you get a lot of those kind of arm's length Matumbo rejections in the mountains. Not as all is not what it seems when you're scouting on the mountains, in the mountains, from my
Gotcha.
perspective.
Understood.
But when you go to Kansas, when you go to the Midwest, a lot of times things are exactly as they seem, right?
Yeah.
Like you walk into I'm just going to use the first property that we hunted in Kansas. It was a piece of walk-in Weehaw, and as an example, you have a bean field on the western side of the property. You have a bean field on the eastern side of the property. You have block timber to the north,
Mm-hmm.
block timber to the south. You have one piece of timber that connects them both, right? You think food on both sides, bedding on to the north and to the south, and one piece of timber that connects. There's no way it's that simple, right? You go into that place opening day, there's a path that looks like somebody came in with their weed eater in between those two pieces of
Yes.
connecting timber, and I see deer walking up and down it. And I'm like, what's up with that? There's no way, right? But
Mhm.
I would say that kind of opened my eyes to like, there doesn't it can be that simple. There can be instances where it's not that simple, right? There's a lot of different types of ground, right? It's not all just
Very
big ag.
situational, right?
Very situational. It's not all just big ag. There is a lot of cattle ground and pasture ground too. It's like that's grown up. And I actually shot a buck off a piece that was just pasture, had no ag in it at all. But if you're
Neighboring had
looking,
ag though.
the neighbor had ag, right? But looking at that piece as an example is like, on those early season patterns, that bed to food is really important, or just that transitionary zone between two bedding areas that is surrounded by food. So I'm trying
Mhm.
not to overcomplicate it, because it really
For sure.
was that simple. I think where it gets difficult is your access and your wind, because it's like I've got bedding to the north, to the south, and I got food to the east and to the west. Which spot am I going to burn? Right.
Yeah, but I think at that point it's like it's taking the easiest thing to like sometimes overcome though, because like I would rather know where the deer are and then try to battle the access or the wind versus the opposite. Right? Oh, I know 100% where. But that's also the thing. Like, if you don't know where the deer are, then how do you know if your access is good or not? You know what I mean? So it's kind of one of those things. So like, it's honestly like a very good situational. So how would you? So that's kind of more like the Midwest ag thing, like just literally in a nutshell. And I know we
Dude,
kind
your
of
hat
skimmed.
is just cracking me up. Just looking at it. When you talk,
Why?
your tail just moves.
I'm trying to, dude. I like it.
So some
I
guys
like
like,
it.
I beat up a dude in high school who looked like that, and I'd do it again. I mean,
Well, joke's on you because in high school when I wore this, all the guys would just tug on the back. Wait, what? Okay. Anyways, no, I'm not trying to skim over like the Midwest stuff and like be like, oh, it is that simple. But at least for us, it kind of was, right? Like the biggest downfall we had was the pieces that had pressure on it. Other pressure. Like you go in a a parking spot and it had 6 other trucks there, and you're like, well, damn. So you do a U-turn and then you try to like halfway try to find a new piece that really isn't touch with that pressure. Now there's things you can go there's things you can do to try to get away from pressure, like whether that be finding pieces that aren't really that noticeable on the map, which I don't want to say overlook spots because like that's very overused term, but I guess to put it simple is like try to hunt wherever there isn't like uh big towns or big cities near that piece of public, right? Like for instance in Kansas, I'm not going to say any names, but the pressure we seen at this one spot that had quite a bit of good public around, which we seen good bucks in those spots, but since there was hotels and a McDonald's and other things like that very close to those pieces of public, people just like myself like comforting things. That was a very comfortable situation, but you ran into more pressure, which the deer really seemed to take a toll on the deer. And we went 2 hours away. That it probably a good hour 30-minute drive, because remember when Carol was driving up and we're like, dude, stop and get us some food, blah blah blah, because there ain't crap for like a good 45 minutes around here. And we ran into less pressure. Now, did that mean we seen more deer? No. So that's something I would say just as a little tip. Like, definitely use the bed, the food, and everything Christian said, but also know where you're hunting and the surrounding areas. Like, is there a big town? And also the time of year, right? Like, sometimes it would be better to maybe use your vacation time in the early season in these spots where deer are a little bit more patternable and it might be a little bit warm, but also there's not going to be as many hunters out, because it seems like when we went, it was like basically having our own private land on these public spots because there was no people around, right? And we seen 12 15 deer sit. Now, were they very big? Were they mostly doe? Yes, but at the same time, fast forward to November, all those people seem to be using the vacation time the same exact time we did, so there was just an ample amount of people. So where you hunt and then the time of year you hunt is kind of critical on that standpoint, especially for an out-of-state option. So a question I have for you, we kind of skimmed over the Midwest stuff. How would you focus on early season in the more, let's say, mountainous areas, in the South, whether that be, pine trees mixed with oak flats and stuff like that?
Well, not bed to food. I can
Not
tell
bed
you
to food.
that. Not bed to food. If I was
Why
hunting
is that
something,
though?
just because bedding is so variable. Like, and that's one of the things that I would like to point out. Like, and what makes I'll juxtapose those two things together. So when you say bed to food, like when you talk about Midwestern stuff, it's usually block timber, right? Around here, it's around where you live right now, where we grew up. You might have 10 acres of timber, a little 2-acre patch. You go, there might be another finger that's a little more, right? It's a little more variable. When you go to ag, they have structured these fields and stuff to get the maximum acreage out of like tillable land, right?
Most bang for their buck, yeah.
The most bang for their bucks. So the timber is like blocked, right? It's usually in rectangles or squares or like maybe odd shapes that are hard edges. And so it like isolates the bedding, but it makes it almost like an impenetrable force. Like, they're in there. It's like one of those situations where they're in there, but it's like, how am I going to get them out of there? How do I know how they're going to access the field? And they'll do something different a lot of times.
That's why
So
God made oxbows.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's the hard part of understanding that early season Midwestern stuff in context to betting is like betting is very defined. You know where the betting is, but it's very hard to, in a lot of times, access it or find how the deer are in and out accessing it, which, there comes the scouting, the bed to food. Sometimes the bed to food is wake up out of the bed, walk 10 yards out into the field, and then come back to the bed 10 yards. Like, well, how do you take advantage of that strategy? You don't. You try to you are like, I can see the deer, but I can't kill it. So I will give the Midwest, that's something that's hard. And I say all that to say this: when you're let's just say October 1 in a mountainous area like where we hunt in Oklahoma, the bedding is not like that in any way. The deer bed in the grass, and the grass, it's like this thick blow down and grass, and maybe let's just call it a select cut from 5 years ago that has really head high grass, good bedding. That's the same thing right there as it is 400 yards that way, as it is 800 yards that
Mhm.
way. So I think the deer, in my experience and what I've seen on trail cameras and hunting, a lot of times is bedding in one spot, moving, bedding in another spot, moving, bedding in another spot. I think those deer have a lot of beds. And
Yeah.
you have, in the early season, you're typically not having a lot of oaks dropping in the early part of the season. So it's like, well, what are you taking into account for food? Browse, natural browse, bushes, leaves, tender end of growth, right? Stuff that's been burnt that year that's nice and tender and small. Well, how do you take advantage of that? It's really hard to do. So yeah, we just hunt in the early season, at least in the mountainous stuff. We hunt travel corridors, and we hunt very, very, very close to good bedding, and hope for the best, because there is no bed to food, and usually at that point there is no good established food, unless you see it differently.
Well, I don't really see it like that differently. You're right. There's not a time or place where they should be betting. Like, okay, you might walk through something like early summer or whatever, or I'm sorry, late summer, that it's like, okay, hey, this is a bed, this is a bed. But most of the time it's like, okay, that's doe beds, right? Um, but also during the season and during early season, like October 7th or 14th, whatever that would be, I've noticed, like, walking through, because I used to walk in with the headlamp, right? Like, even when I was climbing a tree, I had a headlamp on, and I would see eyes that were bedded along these, like the upper tops of these little drainages. I don't mean big drainages. I just mean like this little dried up, secondary creek that, there would be eyes bedded, and you turn and look and there's a doe bedded right there, or hell, it could have been a buck, but like that's where that thing was bedded. It wasn't bedded in like head high grass, which I know a lot of them do, because when you walk through it during the summer, you'll see all these trails intertwined in this 9 foot grass, and you're like, oh my God, like this is a highway right here, but there's no way to hunt it. And so, like, I think the bedding's so variable that it's like you don't know where they're going to bed that day, which studies have shown, like bucks have, and just, I guess, deer in general have multiple beds. And so it's kind of overwhelming, but I think that's why you need to kind of, like, again, be aggressive on that standpoint, and like obviously try to find, like, the good sign, whether that be, scrapes or maybe a rub line or something like that. Like, definitely key in on that. But I think what I'm going to try to do this season is be aggressive and like try to find the deer, but mainly pay attention to, like, where the does are and how they're kind of using it, because hopefully, more than likely, it's like, okay, if a doe group is using this, what's the chances of also, a decent buck that I would like to shoot, that I'd be happy shooting, is also using this, or maybe in the same area, that might be, checking out that doe group for when, the does come into estrus or something, early, or I'm sorry, late October, early November, something like that, might be kind of cruising around, because there's studies. I don't know the exact numbers, but I was listening to this on the MSU Deer Lab, their podcast that they have, that deer move obviously so much more during the rut and stuff, because they're trying to find doe and all that stuff, than they do during the early season. Like, early season, they might walk, like, again, don't hold me on the numbers, but they might only move like 100 yards a whole day. during the early season, and then it might be freaking 2,000 yards a day during the rut or something like that. So knowing that their movement is going to be very, very limited, I would try to find some sort of food source and key in on where that may be, and then try to find the nearest possible what looks like bedding to you near that food source, and like really trying to like get up in that chili to try to literally just picture the doe getting or the buck getting up and then only having to walk maybe 50, 75 yards to eat, and then he's going to go back or maybe find a new bed or something like that.
Yeah, that's the scary part about that early season stuff, especially in a place. Let's just call it non-ag place, right? Is there isn't a destination food source, right? There is like micro little bitty food sources all over the place, and that's why if I saw something that I was like, oh, that's a food source, and there's a bedding area right here, I might try to like take advantage of that. But to me, I'm more like, at least the way I think about it is like, okay, there's a bedding area there. I'm going to try to get as in or as close to it without disturbing it as I can, and just hope they use this travel corridor, which might be a drainage or might
Mm-hmm.
be something that connects to another bedding area. That's just
It
the way I think
sucks.
about it.
No, yeah, it sucks because it's all so situational. Like this little situation could be completely different than a half mile over here where you have kind of like the similar layout, but they're using it completely different, or they're bedding around it a completely different way. So it's almost like you just have to be the right place, the right time, is what it feels like. You know what I mean? Like when you're up in the tree and you're like, you sit here for 2 or 3 sits, then all of a sudden you might make a little micro adjustment and move 75 yards over this way. And then all of a sudden it happens. You're like, dude, it felt like, yeah, I got it done, but it felt like I was just right place, right time. Like, and it was almost like a luck factor in a way. And that's really what it seems to be. Like rut, a lot of people don't like the rut because it's a lot less unpredictable. But in the mountainous stuff, it's almost like what you want to keep. Like it's what you're waiting for, because you find a drainage or some sort of like something to funnel them down into you, and it's like, okay, they're probably going to be using this. The 2 mile spot, a completely perfect example. Like, yeah, is there a lot of food around? Yes, but especially during the rut, if you get those cooler temperatures in there and stuff, we had 7 or 8 different bucks in like a 2-day span when that cold front came in, which
Oh
we
yeah.
weren't there at the time, but it's really eye opening. It's like, okay, cool. Like this is what needs to take place in order for me to be successful. And this little area is just like the little travel corridors or whatever, but it's not so much obviously in the early season. So it's like a two polar opposites in a way, but I still think from an aggressive standpoint, I think you need to be as aggressive as you would during the rut as you are in early season.
Yeah, it's weird because if you they're like almost complete opposites. Early season in ag country is like, oh my gosh, this is like Christmas, right?
Mm-hmm.
The deer are as patternable and as predictable as they're going to be the whole year. But you take that to somewhere else that's like non-ag, and it's like, okay, the deer are moving as least they will the entire year and as least predictable as they are, because they're kind of moving on a whim and just working through these bedding areas, right? And they're just complete opposites. One is like you're praying and hoping for good luck, and the other one is like you're at a kid at Christmas. So the early season can be very different depending where you are, right? It can still happen
Mm.
anywhere, but that's how I think about it, because ag country, like I'm going on a early season Kansas hunt, like mid September. I'm extremely confident in that hunt, and that's what's going on at that time. If I was to take that same hunt in the mountains, I'd be like, please get up out of your bed and move today.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And they might not move by me that day. They might move a little bit, but not by me.
I remember, I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year before. No, it could have been last year. Uh, Regardless, there was a time when we were hunting early season where it was like day 2 or 3, or it could have been the second or third weekend. We were hunting this piece of public or something like that. And it's like, you know what? After this sit, like I thought this was going to be money, but after this sit, uh, it was down Rattlesnake. Rattlesnake Road, obviously. So it was down that like one of those little fingers. I was like, there should be deer here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get down after this morning sit, and I'm just going to walk. I'm going to walk down this little finger, and I'm just going to see if there's a deer anywhere close. Now, could they have been bedded, like a big buck been bedded, and like me walking, and it just be 75 yards off where I was walking, and just be watching me the whole time and not get out of his bed and bust? Maybe,
I'm sure that
but
happens a lot.
yeah, I'm sure too. But I walked down it for like 2 weekends just to check, and I didn't hear one doe blow. I didn't see or hear anything run off, and I'm just like, where are these deer? Like, I'm in an ideal spot that I think is ideal, and like not really that easy to get to, but it's obviously there's no pressure here is what I'm trying to say, and still yet I can't even bump a deer walking through. So what the heck do I know? Versus in November, there's quite a few people hunting there, but also Justin, Jordan, and Jared went and hunted that same spot, and they had shot opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's like, you could be at the right spot, just not at the right time. But then again, it's like, so therefore it's like, okay, where are they during the early season? I don't know, but I think you just need to be aggressive and like literally jump around and bounce around until you really find them, because there are spots. And I really do think, just especially the mountain stuff, does have a lot to do with that, because sooner than later, whether they go by and just check them, because 2020 is a perfect example. We were hunting the Booner, and we like literally from October 1st, we were trying to focus around this deer, right? So like we hunted where we thought we were, or where we first started getting pictures of him, and then we got a picture of him over here, and then we started hunting around there, and then he was just another ridge back, and so we started hunting around here, and then we didn't have any pictures of him back there. But what I was seeing consistently before we moved to the kill tree spot was every single time there was like a doe or two that took the same path every single day. I sat there for like 2 weekends in a row. There was a doe, and then there was a spike, right? A doe and a spike. And then every now and then you'd get kind of something running, down this one little ridge where there's too many trees you couldn't see, but you could definitely tell it was a deer. And then after seeing just those doe, but I remember hearing blowing, and it wasn't blowing at me. The wind wasn't blowing over there. It was down the drainage and then up. The next weekend, I was like, okay, I'm going to set there, because all I've been seeing is this doe and spike every single day. But I've been hearing a lot of blowing over here. It wasn't at me. It might be coyotes, but regardless, there's doe here. We ended up setting there, and we got 3 or 4 shots at bucks. So I killed one October 16th or 17th. I got him European mounted right in front of me. And then November 2nd, I killed the one behind me. But what did I see? I seen consistent does the whole time. And I think that just is to me, for the mountainous area, is key. And that could be, and I could just be getting griped at the comments like, no joke, you want to focus on the does early season. But like, that's literally my biggest thing. Is like, okay, don't worry about the bucks. I think the bucks will come eventually, because hunting, it's a game of patience, right? And whether that be they go to check out the doe groups before the rut, just to kind of see and check up on things, or maybe they're kind of trying to use the same food source or same terrain features to get from point A to point B. But I think if you find the does, which they tend to be more loudmouthed than the bucks, obviously, because they just blow it whatever, it seems like, I think that's how you can either get lucky during the early season or really find good opportunity during the rut. Listen, guys, we wouldn't be able to do the podcast if it wasn't for you all. So we just want to say that you guys are greatly appreciated, and thank you for following along each week.
And speaking of support, we are partnered with Out on a Limb Manufacturing, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, Matt and Chase are great, down-to-earth guys, and they make some of the best saddle hunting products out there. Whether you're looking for a set of climbing sticks or a mobile, lightweight, hang-on tree stand, or maybe you're even a one-sticker.
You mean tree Pilates?
Yes, tree Pilates. If you've been to the grocery store or the gas station lately, you know that Uncle Joe is doing his absolute worst to take all your money. That's why we need hunting gear that lasts year after year. And trust me, I've been rocking the same Out on a Limb Shakar climbing sticks for 4 years and the Ridge Runner 2.0 saddle hunting platform for a few years as well. This gear is built to last.
We can confidently say that Out on a Limb is the best bang for your buck.
And it's the best gear if you want to deflate a big old buck.
Ooh. Make sure you use code HNTA15 at outonalimbmfg.com. or 15% off anything on their website.
So if you can show them the same support that you guys show us, please go to outonalimbmfg.com and use code HNTA15 for 15% off at checkout. Now let's get back to the podcast.
If you guys are anything like us, you love being in the deer woods and chasing big bucks. But there's another part of you that has that itch to chase other big game species.
If you've ever dreamed of chasing black bear, mule deer, or moose, Alberta, Canada is the land of opportunity for these adventure-style hunts.
Each year, hundreds of first-time visiting hunters from around the world come to Alberta for the options, quality, and accessibility that the land offers.
With over 1,800 Boone and Crockett entries and endless possibilities of taking multiple species on a single trip, Alberta is truly a paradise for a big game hunter. This is why we partnered up with the Alberta Professional Outfitters Society. To check it out, go to apos.ab.ca and click Find an Outfitter. From there, you can browse all the different big game species and hunting styles that fit with what you want out of the hunt.
Or you can send a free hunt inquiry through the Follow the Lead tool, and the outfitters who have what you are looking for will reach out to you directly.
So make sure to check out apos.ab.ca to learn all about hunting in Alberta and get connected to the right outfitter for you. Those does and bucks don't live completely separate lives either. Like It's not like y'all stay over there and I stay over here. Like
Right.
a lot of times you see even in the early season, you see a doe and you're like, sweet. And then 3 minutes later, it's like, there's a buck. Is he with her? They might not be with each other.
They might not have that on their brain yet.
No, but they use the same areas. They're thinking about the wind. They're thinking about like where they're going to bed. They're thinking about where they're going to eat, and they're thinking about how they're going to travel.
They're not completely different species.
They're not completely different species. And I think you do hear that a lot, like buck bedding, or the buck was in this isolated spot right here, completely separate from the does. And I'm like, maybe.
Like big bucks are loners. I've had, some might be, but also at the same time, maybe. Like we had Big John on camera. No one knows on the podcast of Big John. Like I don't think we ever popped up a picture because we're still in the process of hunting that deer, right?
You'll see him when he's dead.
Exactly. But he might be a loner. We don't know that for sure, but it didn't really seem like it from the early trail cam pictures because it seemed like he had a couple smaller bucks around him. But with that being said, it's like, okay, if you're hunting away from your house and you only have a certain amount of time to get it done, do you, like, as the average Joe, do you really want to focus up on that loner buck where he's probably going to be more harder to kill if he doesn't like any doe groups, any smaller bucks, anything that hanging around him? Do you really want to focus all your time? Maybe if he's a 180, 190, yeah, probably you might want to focus in on him and just like risk worth the reward, maybe. But for the most part, if you don't really have any history with this piece of public or anything like that, you don't want to be chasing that loner buck because you just want a buck that you'd be happy with, or maybe you get into a position where it's like, hey, I don't want to throw all my eggs in that basket. But what you learn from that is by doing so is you focus in on that area that deer might be living in, and but maybe that one particular deer isn't living in that. The chances of you actually finding a buck that you'd be more than happy to take home living in that area because it has all the right food, the right bedding, the right cover, all that good stuff, is pretty high. And it might not be that one specific loner buck, but it could be another buck, I guess, that you didn't know existed living there that you would like to take.
So let's simplify it for people in the early season. You're looking for, in my mind, and I think you'd agree with this, like really, really good bedding. You're trying to get as close to really, really good bedding in a non-ag area as you can, because those deer aren't going to be moving a ton. There's not going to be, you might be in a special spot where you do see a lot of deer sightings, but early season is plagued by little deer sightings, right? Those just go together, right? Like you're hunting all weekend.
Does and dinks is what we call them. Does and dinks.
You're hunting all weekend for one sighting at a buck, right? Or one sighting at a decent buck. And so I think that's like a simple way to put it. I think that's what I'm trying to do.
You're right. I think food comes secondary to bedding in early season and the more mountainous parts, because there could be, one good oak dropping that the deer just love that particular tree because it drops great and it's close to the bedding. Or it could be a situation where it's like, hey, they just forage whatever the heck they're going to be eating in this particular area. Obviously, from state to state or even area to area within the same state, that might be different what the deer key in on or what they really prefer to eat in that scenario, whether that be, from maybe one area is having a drought, one area isn't, or whatever. So there's different food sources. So you can't, it isn't an end all be all where it's like, oh, you need to focus on the oaks because they can eat dang near anything, really.
Well,
So,
go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, like, I would focus more primarily on where they're bedding and try to, and I know we're kind of contradicting ourselves when we're like, oh, they could really bed anywhere, but also at the same time, you're telling us to really focus on the bedding. Mainly just what I mean by that is like, I think if you bump a deer walking through somewhere that you think is bedding during the early season in these more mountainous parts, then you're probably pretty close to the bedding. So you take a look at OnX and it's like, okay, what does this look like from this aerial perspective where I'm at now? And I think if you enough times of matching from the actual sightings and where you're bumping them, and then you translate that from OnX or Hunt Stand or whatever you use, I think or Spartan Forge, if you do that enough times, you're going to be like, okay, hey, look, this area reminds me of this particular spot that I walked through 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, and I think sooner or later you can kind of pick those, and it is kind of like a happenstance where it's like it could work or it could not work, but that's just early season, in my opinion.
But when you were saying that, it just made me think of something. In a lot of areas, especially non-ag areas, bedding, food, browse, topography, all that could be in one spot. Like,
Yes,
all of that could be an example, and it's a personal example, but the spot we call the community center. I've killed 2 bucks in there on public out of this
good
one
example.
spot. It is a bowl with a lot of pines, a lot of really thick, like bedding cover underbrush, thorns, just a bunch of different varieties of bushes. There's also a really good oak flat throughout the entire thing. It has food, it has bedding, it has browse, and it has topography in one spot. Right. So in the early season, it's a really good early season spot.
Diverse.
It's diverse.
Yeah.
It has all those things right there. But the main thing that it has out of all of those that makes me want to sit there is bedding. I know I'm close to the deer. I know I'm close to them. So that's the thing in a non-ag area that I would just focus on is that really good early season bedding, because you can be on a good food source. And it's like, if that deer doesn't get up till 2 minutes before light or 30 minutes after light's gone, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter at all. You're hunting him on a very condensed pattern, which is funny because in ag country, early season, the deer move a ton. They do. Like, they go to destination food sources.
They have to, because the food they want to eat isn't the best cover at that point.
I know. That's what makes deer so cool, right? In one area, it's like they might move 50 yards today. In the other area, it's like they're going to move half a mile. It's just how can you get in between them, right? It's completely different. It's pretty awesome, too.
Yeah, that is. I'm excited, dude. I'm so excited just to get at it. I don't know, because, and I think everybody who kind of has a podcast will hopefully think the same thing. It's like, man, I talk all this talk, but I want to get out there and actually walk the walk and be like, see, look, there is a little bit of validation to what I've been saying, right? But at the same time, it's like, you don't know. And again, what is so cool about it is it's so situational. Like what might work in our neck of the woods, it might be completely different from your neck of the woods. And like, that's what we hear quite a bit from like our podcast guests and all that stuff is like when they talk about this particular thing, like, hey, like this is just anecdotal experience is what I'm saying. And it might be different from their neck of the woods. What they always relate back to is like the old days of the VCR tapes or watching the Outdoor Channel about, the big Midwest. They got a big old food plot or a big old bean field out there and they're sitting in their sky tower blinds, somewhere in the Midwest. It's like, that's awesome. That works for you. But my neck of the woods, I don't have that. Like your food plot is as big as the property I can hunt. And
right
across the fence is Timmy and Bobby, and they love shooting deer. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but like, it just doesn't translate to my particular situation. And so I think if people can take that with like, which I think a lot of people do, I think people smartening up big time when it comes to this, but maybe some new hunters, like you got to take what's given to you, but also put it into the context of where you're hunting at. Does that make sense?
Yeah, if you're like, what you got to do is get in between a big block of timber with a small jut of timber coming out to a ag source. Someone might hear that and be like, first of all, what's ag? I don't even know what that term means.
Yeah.
You
Are you
know what
talking
I
about my
mean?
corn feeder or?
Yeah, right. And then you might say mountainous, and someone might say, first of all, I have is corn, beans, and alfalfa. I don't even know what you mean by that. What do you mean a drainage?
A pine
Right?
tree? What's
Yeah,
that?
pine tree. I mean, that's what's so cool is someone. And I think that's part of being like a well-rounded hunter. And I think that's one of the things that stuck out to me when we talked to the element the other day was
Element?
element the other day. Sorry about that. It's early for me. Um, was they were talking about when they go into a place and they look at something like, okay, this is how it is. Why is it that way? And like asking yourself that question. Like, and in the mountains, I often ask myself why, and there's never an answer. I'm like, yeah,
My
right.
why is usually, why am I out here? Why aren't I back at camp sleeping?
Why
This is
am
a
I
waste
not
of
at
time.
home? Yeah, I mean, pretty
Yeah.
much. But
Stepping back away from like, because what we were primarily talking about just momentarily is the public aspect. From our private standpoint, like, right, I got some private, I can hunt Northeast Oklahoma. You got private, you can hunt in Southwest Oklahoma, correct? So what's the difference there? Like, which I kind of touched on the Northeast Oklahoma, how it's like cattle fields and all that's good stuff. But how is it in Southwest Oklahoma? What is your early season strategy? Because in the past, I mean, if we have any longtime listeners, you've been rather successful in the early season here in Oklahoma. So, kind of, what's your whole game plan around that, and like, why do you think that is?
in the past, it's I tend to the private pieces that I have tended to be like 80% bedding, which, as you can probably tell, someone who didn't grow up around food, it's like that's just how you have to hunt. It's around bedding, so like that makes me feel good. Um, I hunt river bottom pieces primarily, which have big tree pins and oxbows and a lot of really good bedding and grasses on them. And then, to be honest, the easiest way to hunt those places with a corn feeder, right? Like I'm competing in a lot of those areas against big ag.
Right. So why wouldn't you use a corn feeder in this situation? Because instead of disturbing the bedding to make some sort of kill plot or something along those lines, you're really taking the limited resource in that area, if you were to do so, and like making it much more limited, yes, but like you're kind of ruining the pool to your property. Does that make sense? So
Right. If
therefore a
all you
corn
have is
feeder.
bedding, yeah.
Right.
If all you have is bedding and you want to go through the bedding to find the deer and hunt them, it's kind of like counterintuitive in a way.
Hmm.
But I mean, we use corn feeders on the edges of our properties, places that are really easy to access and get in with a good wind direction. Um, I don't know. I don't find that I've done that 2 years in a row and shot bucks, and it's not to me. It's really easy to kind of set out corn and wait, right, and just have consistent buck movement, especially when you're hunting primarily bedding areas. To me, it's not super fun anymore. So I don't really plan on doing that anymore, which kind of limits me in the early season, right? If I'm not going to be hunting over a corn feeder, what can I do? Well, I'd have to hunt some sort of transitionary area from that bedding to maybe a destination food source that's half a mile away. There's not a lot of consistency in that pattern in the river bottom stuff where I'm at because it has a lot of bedding. So what that kind of limits me to is waiting for a time of year like the rut, where having good bedding is a very good thing because you have a lot of does and bucks just pushing does, and also another time is that late October timeframe pre-rut where deer are a little more susceptible to calling, and so the preseason, if I'm not willing to hunt over a corn feeder in those bedding areas, is really tough. It'd be a really
Hmm.
tough hunt. But over a corn feeder, it would be pretty much not a guarantee, but maybe a shot opportunity guarantee. So it's just what you want to get out of it. That's not really what I want to get out of it anymore. It's a little more than just like putting another one on the wall, especially when you look at those taxidermy costs.
Dude.
Um,
And they keep going
so-
up every single year. So
Yeah. Thanks, Biden. No, but that's it for me. Another good one on the wall.
hey, you listen here. Okay, if you vote for her, then she'll fix everything she could be fixing now. So just keep that in mind.
If you let me hunt your property, I'll kill the buck you've been waiting to hunt. Let me. No, I'm with her. No,
yeah,
that's just how I think about it with the corn feeder and bedding situation. And by the way, it's like one of those situations. I've actually heard it called defensive baiting. If I didn't have to bait, I wouldn't want to.
Okay, I understand.
But it's like it's one of those things. If you're in a state where you can bait and you don't, you're just the idiot that doesn't get to see deer, right?
Yeah.
Because those deer will change their bedding areas according to that feeder. They're like, I'm going to bed way closer because it's hot and I want to eat right there, right?
Right. Yeah. I don't know. See, I think feeder. What do you say to people that because it's just the way the internet goes, right? You mentioned you could have an excellent point. You could have, say the right things and everything makes 100% sense about something that's completely unrelated to even a corn feeder. But if you mention the word corn feeder in anything, anything that person says, people seem to be like, okay, you mentioned a corn feeder. What you have to say is completely irrelevant. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, what do you have to say to those type of people that is so that would be willing to die on the non-corn feeder hill? Like, what's the point?
I don't know, because to be completely honest with you, which I will be completely honest since it's our podcast, I feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Like when somebody says something, they're like, "This buck came out of this." I'm like, whatever. It's the feeder, dude. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Well, there's always something in the back of your mind, obviously, but
Right.
But to me, I guess where I'm going with that is like that's not always the case, because like I run a corn feeder on my private. You know how many deer I've killed, how many bucks I've killed off of the corn feeder?
0.
This many bucks off of a corn feeder. I lied. One. I had a corn pile. So yeah, but I also had a decoy out there. So I always call him the decoy buck, just so
the corn buck.
The keyboard warriors won't let me know how wrong I was. But yeah. So I've killed one buck and I've hunted that property for close to 10 years. It could be 10 years this upcoming year. But most of the time it's just, dude, it's a good way to kill a doe and all that good stuff. And again, that's another topic that I want to talk about is early season doe killing, right? Like how important is that? Because there's a lot of people, and I'm kind of one of them on my private. It's like, I don't want to kill any doe early season on my property because I maybe hunt somewhat close to a bedding area. I don't want to shoot a doe and then track through that bedding, or maybe I don't want to shoot a doe that could potentially bring a buck from the neighbors to my spot during the rut, right? So, but also at the same time is like what I've come to find out is those doe you shoot early season are critical in helping you be able to pull off the shots during prime time when you really want to kill that buck, right? Because it's like a practice in that situation. You're basically practicing on killing that buck, but this thing just doesn't have horns, right? So do you want to talk about how critical it is to kill doe just for your psyche?
I like it. I think it always has helped me. You can read a ton about doing push-ups. You ain't gonna get a big chest unless you sit down there and you do them. Like you can practice all summer long, shooting into your bag target.
Those aren't push-ups. Those are McDonald's titties.
You can practice all summer long shooting into your bag, but it's not a deer, right? So I think about it like this: somebody that shoots 2 bucks a year, right? Or let's just say they shoot a buck a year. That's a good experience, right? But you only get to see that pin floating on a deer and executing a shot one time a year. So it might take you a decade to get a good sample size or a good amount of experience shooting deer with a bow versus someone who sits back and shoots their limited does. So they shoots 4 does a year and then 2 bucks. They just shot 6 let's just say one buck. They just shot 5 times as many deer as you did. Now, most people, they may have a property that they can shoot that many does on. They might not. But I think it's really important because to me, bow hunting, everything's confidence. It's just like having seen something happen before gives you the confidence that it will happen again. I don't want the first time that my pin touches hide this year to be on a 150-inch deer. I don't want to, because your mind runs. I want to have been like executed that shot on a doe. And the reality is it's a lower stakes thing. If you shoot a doe and you mess it up, is the animal any less valuable? No. But you're not going to go home and,
Cry about it.
cry. Maybe but you're not going to go home and like complain to your wife for 3 hours about doing that on a doe. It'll upset you. But I think you have to have the game time reps because it helps your psyche. It helps. It's the only practice that matters to me, because when I draw back and I execute a good shot and I hammer a doe and she runs 30 yards and falls over, I'm like, sweet. Now when a buck does that, I'm doing the same thing.
You're literally running every single scenario in your head, except just not the added pressure of, oh my God, look at the rack on his head. You know what I mean? Like, that's the only thing you're not doing. That doe is still alert. Could possibly be even more alert than a buck usually. That's arguable. But like, for instance, me last year, right? Like I shot one doe, but it was on private and it wasn't on public. It wasn't out of a saddle. Before I had shot opportunities at bucks on public. Well, just me not shooting does out of my saddle beforehand or anything like that, or just having that whole mindset, a buck walks on my weak side shoulder instead of stepping through and having the mental capacity to like, okay, let's do this right, to step through, have your strap right here, your back against a tree, and be able to have a steady shot. My first instinct was like, let's just try to get drawn back, and like hopefully he makes a movement where it'll be easier for me to like, where I'm not so torqued in the saddle, right? I didn't do that, so that resulted in a buck that I would have been more than happy with taking home, just run off into the sunset. Following the next day, I had a buck that I actually sealed the deal on. No, I'm sorry. So I shot a buck, and it was the right side shoulder. So that was fine. But knowing that I screwed it up on a big buck on my weak side shoulder, the day after I killed, I set the same tree because my motto, it ain't broke, don't fix it. I had a different buck start coming walking through, and I didn't know if I was going to shoot him or not. But my very first thought was like, hey, let's do this right. He's on my weak side shoulder. Let's step through and get in position. And I did. Long story short, that buck never came through. He bedded down 150 yards out, and I didn't realize that he bedded down. I thought he walked off because he was behind some trees. But I ended up seeing him walk off again like an hour and a half later. But I was ready for him is what I'm trying to get at. So just not only the reps of the shot, but just what to do before the shot to make the shot the best shot possible. And in my instance, it was gear related, where I was like, okay, what do I do when it's on my weak side shoulder? And that would have helped if that would have been a doe, or maybe even smaller buck I had to run in with before the big giant.
Yeah. Or something as simple as like, well, when do I draw? It's like, if you have a bad year and you don't kill a buck, it's like, I haven't shot a deer in 2 years. Like,
happened to me. Yeah.
Like, when do I draw? When my pin is dancing on that thing, when do I start applying pressure to the trigger? Do I do it when it settles, when it's still dancing? I promise you, if you wait till the time of like the moment of truth, your brain's going to be like, I got this, like it'll take over and be like, and I just think shooting does and shooting stuff in the early season is a really good opportunity to like practice your patience and practice good execution in like a low stress environment. When I see a doe come in and I know I'm going to shoot her, I do get really excited. I'm like, let's go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But when I see her walking in, I'm like, okay, let's do this right. And I draw it back on her and I settle the pin, and I'm like, also, I'm not more risky with my shots, but I'm like putting it exactly where I want to go. I'm like, I don't care if I hit her in the shoulder with this arrow. Like, I'm trying to hit her right above the heart. Like, I'm aggressive, and it helps me learn like where to shoot, how to aim, how to execute the shot.
That's a good point, because let's say, you've been shooting your bow a lot, you feel like you're dead eye dick with it, and let's say you draw back and your pin's steady as can be, because hey, after this, it's just muscle memory. I got my anchor points on lock mentally. It's like second nature now. But game time scenario, what didn't you notice in that situation that you probably should keep an eye out for? Was she quartered a little bit away? Was she quartered a little bit too? You know what I mean? Like, so just those little situations, it's like, okay, that might be the difference in you hitting, square in the shoulder, or maybe you aimed a little bit too far back where you think it should go, but she's quartered a little bit further in than you thought. And so you hit her too far back and then it goes out, backside flank, but you hit her in the guts coming from the front. If she was completely broadside, that would have been a perfect shot. But since she was a little bit quartered too, you just slightly miss. You might have nicked the lung, something like that. But like, that's just it's the little things that I think you don't realize because you're so focused on like, oh, I'm in game time scenario. Let's stay steady. What's my anchor point? Just all those things. Like you miss the minute stuff. And as you know, as well as I do, like good enough sometimes isn't good enough
It's
when
not
you
good enough.
shoot a deer with a bow. It's
It has
just
to be
like
perfect.
there's too many things that can go wrong.
It has to be perfect for it to work. Like most of the time, in my experience, it has to be perfect. I can think of many scenarios with does where it's like I'm not even paying. Like something as simple as like I'm not paying attention to a front leg. Like, is that front leg back? Is it forward? I've shot deer before where that front leg was back. I shoot him like destroyed her. She takes one step and it's 6 inches back further. I'm like, oh no, that's gonna be a longer day,
Yeah, whether
right?
she's stretched out or not. Yeah.
Whether
Well,
she's
it's 2016, the AT&T buck, right? The one you literally watched me shoot from the other finger of trees. Came out, seen me, started, kind of doing that little slow trot away. Man, stop it. And a little bit quartered away, just slightly quartered away, but I put it directly behind the front shoulder, or the shoulder facing me, that where I wanted it. But since he was a little quartered away, it stuck in that opposite side shoulder. Again, I wasn't shooting, no heavy arrow. It wasn't a fixed blade, nothing that would help you in that situation.
yeah.
And long story short, like I hit it, it did a ditch digger, ran off too far and didn't find it. So it's just like those little slight, if I'd aimed maybe 2 inches back, or maybe if I just got lucky and pulled it or whatever, if it had hit 2 inches back, I think we find that deer.
For sure, and it's it's the little bitty details. I shot a buck in 2019, and I hit him right behind the shoulder, just a little high. And I didn't. He had came in from my left and was like kind of facing me when he came in, but I thought he quartered up before I shot him. It was that big one with the broke off eye guard that I shot at Jake's place.
Oh yeah,
That narrow, tall one, right?
That's a good
I
buck.
shot him high, a little high, right behind the shoulder, and he ran off, and the arrow was like coming out like mid body at the other spot, and I was like, "What the heck?" And now he ran like 80 yards and fell over, but I was like, "What the heck?" And then as I like kind of look and was positioned where he was standing, I was like, "Oh, he was quartered to me maybe 20 degrees." That's the difference between destroying one and watching him run off and like not getting him at all. And like shot selection, waiting for a really good shot. I also like early season, especially shooting does, because there's no pressure to shoot the doe, because if one runs off, there'll probably be another one eventually. So you are waiting for that perfect shot, and while you're waiting for the shot, you're just sitting there examining them. Like, okay, her shoulders forward. Okay, she actually took 2 more steps. I'm gonna range her again. All those crap that when the buck walks in, you're like, that
When
you
or
can
when you
actually
can't move.
think through it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're practicing thinking. You're practicing making good decisions, where it's like in a low stakes environment.
And if you're us or anything like us, you need all the practice you can get when it comes to thinking, because
Yeah. Yeah. It's the only place I think is in the woods.
yeah,
No,
that's
but
awesome.
that's it. I mean, I heard something yesterday that was a guy talking about martial arts, and he said, why do you train at a low heart rate when you're learning new techniques? And he said, because when you're at an elevated heart rate, you don't think.
Mm.
When a big buck comes in, you don't think.
I believe it.
You're not thinking, right? When it's a low stakes environment and you're worried, let me put that pin on there, let me execute a good shot here, you're actually thinking, right? And so you don't want to be the first time that you try to fire up the old dust the cobwebs up, you know?
Right.
You don't want that to be when it's like, all right, dude, 4th and goal. You got to get this ball in the end zone right now. And sometimes that's how it happens. Sometimes you can't control that. And that's no big deal. You might go out the first day of the season, you're like, that's a 170. I have to shoot it. What do I do? You know? But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if you can, and a lot of that in the South is that scenario. Maybe not as much in the Midwest, but if you can, just try to get some reps. And that might be shooting. If you're the element, shoot it. It's like shooting $5 in a year instead of $1 and 4 does, right? But
Mhm.
that's just how I think about it. I think that's helped me a ton, is just hunting in a place where I can shoot 5 deer, 6. I think I've shot 6 deer the last 2 years, 6 and 6. And it's like that helps a lot on shots in my mind.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's a good point. So, yeah, that's our version of early season and the kind of like the do's and don'ts. I mean, is there anything that you would say like is a no-go for early season, right? Because for me on private, and maybe the same on yours, is if your private's segmented into 20-acre chunks where you only have 20, 40 acres to hunt, obviously pay attention to the wind. And if it's a super good rut spot, maybe don't go and blow your wad in there before it's actually prime time. Maybe go try to find a piece of public and have a few backup spots where if the wind isn't right but you have the time to hunt, you can make a 30-45 minute drive to this little piece. And heck, you might find even by doing that public might have better opportunity than your private in that sense. But is there anything that you would say, is like I would recommend to stay away from and during this early season?
Where my mind immediately went was a lot of people say to stay away from October mornings, and I think that's just BS. In the majority of the country, I absolutely love hunting October mornings, and I think if you're traveling to hunt and you're public land hunting and you don't hunt October mornings, that kind of makes you dumb.
Why is that?
Because deer still move in the mornings. Like, people that say this are mainly talking like, well, I don't want to go bust them off my ag field. It's like,
Well, yeah,
most
the
people
bed to
aren't doing
food,
that.
and obviously they're going to be on the
Yeah.
ag field in the evenings.
Right. It's like, okay, don't hunt them on the ag field. Hunt them somewhere else where they're coming back to bedding.
In Kansas, there was this spot that lake spot that I found a corn pile and a blind that shouldn't have been on public land there. But before I found that, I was hunting this ag field, and it was ag field on public, and then private to my left was ag, private to my in front of me was ag, and then it was public big block of timber, and then where I walked in was just like a little sliver of timber. But that left ag wasn't really ag; it was mainly like a tall grass field, but
It's like a CRP grass, right? Like,
yeah, and so that's where they would bed. Shoot, where am I going with this? What were you just now talking about? I'm losing my train of thought.
not hunting mornings.
Oh yeah. So it was a very, very good spot. I hung a camera there. It looked good. Even when we were up there one September weekend, I didn't even like bring my saddle or anything in. I just wanted to check out this spot. And so I just kind of sat there until deer started funneling into there. And I was like, okay, this is where they're coming from. They're coming from the left. They're coming from that big tall grass. And then like I just bailed and got out of there. And then the next weekend you hunted it. But it was a good spot, a good area in my mind. But obviously from recognizing the bed to food and when you should or shouldn't hunt that ag, it's like, okay, I only want to hunt this spot in the evenings, but how can I use this area to my advantage and possibly hunt at mornings? And that was the maybe, if I know for sure they bed, which some of them don't always bed there, some of them were bedding in that timber, but like walking up in the morning, maybe try to find a spot that maybe and it has quite a bit of sign, because dude, there's so many scrapes as I was walking up to that field that you could probably definitely utilize a morning sit in that big thick timber, and then just pack up your saddle and all that stuff, and in the evenings go hunt over there in the ag where they first come out of that CRP stuff, which worked, and it would have worked. I didn't get very many morning sits there because shortly after a few evening sits, I found that corn pile and stuff, and then we tried to call the game warden. Long story short, they didn't answer, and I didn't want to be caught hunting that area when I knew there was a bait pile in that.
Yeah.
It was still 500-600 yards away from me, but I just didn't want to be caught in that area because I had to walk by it to be able
That'd
to
have
get
been
to
your
my
bait
spot.
pile if you would have got
Exactly.
caught. That'd be like, yeah, sure, dude. Yeah.
So like that spot got X'd off really, really quickly, but it sucked because I didn't get to utilize and really basically capitalize on that predicament. But that's for sure something that I think would have worked.
For sure. Yeah. I think so. If you had to like sum it all up, we just talked about early season. We talked about Midwest. We talked about non-ag stuff that we've hunted. We can only, by the way, anyone that's listening, we only talk about our own experiences. If this doesn't apply to your area, don't apply it. Don't try to make something that we said may work where it doesn't. Right. So, and every situation is a little bit different. But if you had to like one takeaway, like in 2 sentences, early season hunt, you're going out, like, what are you looking for? What is the most important thing in an early season hunt in your mind to killing a buck?
Ag-related places, obviously bed to food, and you kind of know where the deer is going to be, so you hunt where people aren't, and if you combine all that, that's probably going to be the ticket. And then for the more non-ag related places, I would say be aggressive, get close to bedding, and yeah, super simple. What about you?
I totally agree.
Ditto.
That's what I'd say. Like, get in there like chin hair if you're hunting public, especially non-ag places. You got to get close to bedding. You can't just hunt a place that you're like, man, this looks great for the rut. You can't do that. They're not doing that right now. It's 90 degrees. It's 85 degrees. They're not moving a ton. In
They're
ag
thinking
stuff,
the same thing you're thinking
which is
hot.
why am I doing this? Yeah. And then in ag places, like I would say just what you said, bed to food. Don't be afraid to get to a place where you can see very far. Use your glass and find out
Oh, for
exactly what
sure.
they're doing. That would be what I would do. Like, and see a pattern and try to adapt to it because they're very patternable at that time of the year in ag country. That's what I would say.
I like it.
Yeah.
Well, you got any other things you want to shout out? Any housekeeping, anything like that?
Yeah, I will say, you guys listen to this, it's probably first week of September. But we got a ton of hunting videos coming out in into September. So make sure you guys, if you're listening to this on audio, that's fine. But go check out the YouTube channel because we have 5 or 6 hunting videos coming out, one a week for 6 weeks, starting at the end of September.
Last year's hunts, by the way.
Last year's hunts, and we got some pretty good kills on film last year. So I would say check out the YouTube. That's the best way. And then also, please leave us a rating and review. Like we have on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, not just a rating. Please leave us 5 stars. If you don't want to leave that, please don't leave anything. But and then write us something. It could be something simple that you took away from the podcast, or you like it, or even if you hate it. If you're going to leave a hate comment, please leave 5 stars. So that's
That
what
is
I would
true.
say. That really helps us out.
DM us if you don't like anything, because like, hey, we're human, but if you're like, hey man, I don't really like you guys mentioning this so much, or like whatever. Like, long story short, it's our podcast, and like for you to say what we can or can't talk about is one thing, but if you just have anything to say or just like would recommend, like shoot us a DM on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. We're more than welcome to have a discussion, or maybe you're just wanting to say, hey guys, I love your stuff. This is what I killed last year. Send us those freaking kill pics, because those are sick to see too.
And if you guys are wanting to arrange like a parking lot fight with Jake because you hate his hat or something, just hit us up. I'll arrange
Hey,
it.
listen, this is all I have to do right here. Ready? You see this?
Yep.
And then it's go time. You ready? Bob and weave, baby.
Yeah. Well, I can arrange that for you guys, and yeah, we have really good camera equipment. I can put it on WorldStar, whatever you guys think. But seriously, reach out, leave a rating and review, check out the YouTube. Season's going to be here. So we're going to be doing, I did want to say, we're going to be doing a ton of hunt talk episodes now. So you guys will see some episodes coming out from antelope camp, from mule deer camp. We'll do one at elk camp. It's fixing to gear up and get really exciting. So if you're, what do you got?
Finish.
If you're watching on YouTube, oh yeah.
See
If
that?
you're watching on YouTube, that's pretty sick. Yeah, we did just get our new saddles in, huh?
You also see that right there? You see that American flag?
Yeah, so Jake's showing you guys an out on a limb saddle that we just got. We're gonna be running those this year. Made in America, baby. Out on a limb patch.
Absolutely.
as you guys can see, we're trying to, with our sponsors, go 100% made in America, because I don't know if you guys have been watching the election and the prices. Apparently, prices are only up 3%. That's what I was heard. Gas is twice as much, but it's only up 3%. Maybe I'm just but anyways, we're trying to support.
Your money's gonna vanish regardless. So, in a time where it feels like your vote doesn't even matter, let's vote with our dollars. How about that? Because money's going to disappear regardless. So, might as well put it towards something that actually matters, which is in country stuff. And honestly, take it one step further. Only buy stuff that's within your state. Right out on a limb as an Oklahoma-based company. Like if you're from Kansas, Missouri, discard my advice. Buy out on a limb, though.
Yeah, there we go. But I would just say we appreciate you guys. Thank you for listening every week. Podcasts are going crazy right now. You can tell that people are ready for hunting season, and we can tell people are gearing up. So hope everybody has a really good season, and this early season starts out really good for you guys. And if you didn't take anything away from the podcast, feel free to completely disregard it and do what's working for you.
I like it. And with that,
catch you guys in the next one.
Jesus loves you.
Bye.